everyone. This is Hunter Molzen here with the Breaking Boundaries podcast brought to you by Barbell Apparel. And today we have the pleasure of introducing you to Nick Symmonds. He is a high-level runner, a collegiate record holder, a world championship silver medalist, two-time Olympic qualifier, social media star, business owner, and a pilot. Nick, how are you doing today, man?
Good intro, man. You got it all. I'm great. Thanks.
I'm sure with that Swiss Army knife of stuff, we've missed a thing or two that we could talk about as well. But it's good to have you today, man. We're excited to talk to you.
Yeah, good to be here. I love podcasting. I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Yeah. Hopefully we can give our listeners some insight into the things that make high-level athletes such as yourself tick and have success, and maybe learn some lessons the easy way instead of learning them the hard way, as I'm sure you've learned many of the things you picked up over the years.
Yeah. I always said this before the call, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Nothing's off limits. We could talk fitness. We can talk mindset, whatever you guys want to know, hit me with it.
Yeah, for sure. Just to give our listeners a little bit more background, I have some of your personal records here. You ran a sub 4 mile at 3 minutes and 54.9 seconds, which is crazy fast. The ground speed on that's like something wild, like 15 miles an hour, right?
Yeah, you hold it for about 4 minutes, but 15 miles an hour.
Yeah, you're basically like as fast as a moped. A 47, 45, 400 meter, a minute.
I ran that right before the games in 2012.
Awesome. A minute 42.92, 800 meter.
Ran that at the games.
And a 3 minute 34.55, 1500 meters.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, man. You're a fast guy, probably one of the fastest in the world.
I was. Yeah. I mean, those times are mostly from 10 years ago. I had my peak in 2012, 2013, and ran about 3 or 4 more years after that. But it was a great career. I always wanted to see how good I could be. You know, I ran in middle school, ran in high school, ran in college, and the chance to run pro was a huge opportunity. And I always kind of thought of it as a lottery ticket. I'm like, I won the genetic lottery. Now I get to cash that in every day, but I have to, run 10 miles each day to cash the ticket in. So it was a lot of work, but it was, a huge, huge blessing just to get to see how good you could be at something if you went all in on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, to set out and achieve what you did and see the end result of that culminating in placing in the World Championships and competing at 2 Olympic Games had to be a very validating and rewarding outcome for all of the years of hard work.
Yeah, I think it goes to show that consistency and the right mindset, perseverance, goes a long way in anything that you do, whether it's business, whether it's athletics, whether it's your personal relationships. Nothing's perfect. Nothing's linear. It's going to be a roller coaster, and nothing like professional sports and distance running in particular can teach you that. I tried to quit running every season for 20 straight years, but I kept coming back to it. It's a cruel sport, but if you don't give up and you just keep getting stronger and faster each day, you can really get somewhere.
Yeah. And once you have a taste of the progress and the success, and you've kind of like wired your mindset to be dedicated to pursuing something like that, it's probably hard to get out of it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I always say distance running is an acquired taste. I don't think anybody that starts running loves it from day one, but you put the work in, whether it's training for your first 5K or training for your first cross country season. You put this mountain of work in, and you see how far you come in just a few months, and you're like, gosh, that's addicting. Like, my hard work is really transforming me as a person. And, you just keep doubling down on that. And, whether it's just for a season or 2 seasons, or in my case, 20 years, that the addiction is real, of putting hard work in and getting a result out. And, running is just such a concrete way to measure that. It's not like basketball, where you got a team around you. This is you on a track, 400 meters, and a clock that doesn't lie. And, you can break your progress down to the 100th of a second, to the 1,000th of a second in some cases. It's pretty addicting.
Yeah. And the outcome of your competitions usually come down to split times like that, right? Like the tiniest minute details and differences. And I'm sure part of the gratifying aspect of it is being able to look back at things earlier in your running career that felt hard. And then at your peak, those things that once felt hard now felt easy. And of course, there's always more progress to be had, but being able to kind of overcome those things that used to feel hard, to make them feel just kind of like normal every day, is probably part of what made it feel so addicting.
Yeah, there's a famous quote. It's in running and it's in lifting. It doesn't get easier, you just get faster. It doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. So, you're still, I mean, the work that I did when I was 13 is very similar to the work I was doing when I was 33. I was just running much, much faster, and so I think that's kind of a frustrating part of it. You're like, when does this get easy? Well, it's never going to get easy. You just get faster. But I mean, when I was in middle school and high school, I might do my easy runs at like 8-minute mile pace. And routinely as a professional, I could just, effortlessly jog around at 6-minute miles. So, it was fun to look back on my training logs from when I was younger and say like, oh my gosh, I thought that was hard at that time. So you just, again, so concrete, the progress, the results. And again, not linear, but over time, you really, really do make leaps and bounds in improvement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just to dive into that a little bit more, back when you were 13, you were running 8-minute miles for your easy run. And then, further into your athletic career, you're running a 6-minute mile for an easy run. If you had run an 8-minute mile during that period where you could run 6, would it have felt easy?
Oh yeah. I mean, I would be hard for me to run that slow, to be honest. I mean, when we were really fit, just really primed, we could just glide along effortlessly. It really was, I mean, if you're really tired, like maybe you had a really hard workout, you'd come back later that day and just kind of putz around at 8-minute miles. But, I remember doing like 14-mile long runs starting at 6:30 and cutting down to about 5:30, and I wasn't even a distance runner. Like I was a mid-distance runner. Some of the marathoners can run around at 5-minute pace relatively easily. I think the world record marathon, that 2-hour performance by Kipchoge was like 4:17 pace. Can you imagine running a 4:17 mile? And then doing it 26 times back to back to back.
I can't. I never was much of a runner. And I think the fastest mile I ever ran was somewhere on like around the 6-minute mark. And that was like,
that's great running,
all out effort. You know what I mean? To be able to hold below that for a marathon, it blows my mind. But I guess to give our listeners a little bit more context onto kind of how you got into running and what went into the evolution of you as a competitive athlete. What age were you when you started running? How were you introduced to the sport?
I was 13 and going into 8th grade. I had played soccer most of my life, kind of, competitive soccer. And a girl I had a crush on said she was going out for the cross country team. And she's like, the practices are co-ed, come run with me. I was like, oh, okay. So, I kind of got drawn into it that way, but then I ended up being good at it. And so even though I liked soccer more, I loved being outside with my friends, loved just, running through the hills of Boise, Idaho. And I really liked being good at something. I was a mediocre soccer player, but the first cross country race I ever ran, I just, ran away with it. And people were like, wow, you're really good at this. And that was very addicting as a somewhat insecure 13-year-old that wanted to be good at something. Now I had all of a sudden found something that I was naturally very good at.
Yeah, I guess starting in middle school at age 13, is that typical of a high level runner, or do they typically start earlier than that?
Running is one of those things where you can get into it very late in life. One of the guys I made the Olympic team with in 2008, Andrew Weeding, he didn't start running competitively till his senior year of high school. So it's not like, football or baseball, lacrosse, golf, where you're being groomed for this sport from a really, really early age. I think you need to have a background in something. Some swimmers have developed their engines and can then transfer to the track. A lot of soccer players, on the Olympic team, you'll see a ton of ex-soccer players. And I think soccer specifically for mid-distance running is very appropriate for young people because you're developing explosiveness and stamina. And that's really what middle distance running is about. So I do think that my, young days on the soccer pitch helped a lot when I ended up becoming a runner. But, 13 in high school, I think is when you really start seeing people, middle school and high school, coming out for track or cross country for the first time and deciding whether that's the sport for them. And, it weeds out a lot of people. There's a lot of people that say, hey, this just isn't for me. But the ones that kind of, get bit by that bug of doing the hard work and then seeing the results. A lot of them go on to run in college like I did. I went to the Division III school and ran for Willamette University. A lot of them, get really good and go to a D1 school, D2, NAIA, JUCO. There's an option. I always say this to your listeners. If you want to run in college, there is an option for every single person at every single level.
Yeah, it's great. You don't have to be, necessarily the best of the best to make it to college. You can kind of have a number of options as long as I'm assuming you have to be at least somewhat good, right? Like,
No, you don't.
oh,
Honestly, you
really?
could be a just an absolute turd of a runner, and there is a college program for you. So I really mean it's not like basketball, baseball, golf, where like you really, teams are pretty cutthroat and you have to show a certain amount of like natural ability. No, running's open for everybody. You could be truly the slowest runner in the world, and I promise you there's a college program you can go run at. It's a welcoming sport. Everybody gets the same amount of playing time on a cross country course. There's so many different levels, so many different options, and so many coaches that just want to develop young talent. They're not necessarily saying, I have to win a national title. There are those coaches out there, but for every one of those coaches, there's 10 that just want to help people find fitness and a love for running.
Yeah. And I guess within that, there's different mediums within running as well. You have middle distance, long distance, sprint. And then I've had several people I know that were high caliber athletes in other types of athletics earlier in their life, and then got bit by the running bug later in life. And were never particularly fast, but were just tough as hell and decided to do like ultra marathons and ultra distance runnings and things like that. And, they're not completing those events with a ton of speed, but just completing them at all is a pretty impressive task. So, I suppose that no matter what kind of like inclination you have, whether you want to run short distance really fast or do middle distance like you did, or do any of the more formal events or do something more on the fringes like the ultra running, there's kind of something for everyone in that regard.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such an inclusive sport. I always loved when I was sitting on, a world team or an Olympic team, like looking to my left and looking to my right, and you'll have a 300-pound guy from Iowa that was raised on a farm throwing shot put. And then you'll have a 90-pound Kenyan transplant, naturalized American, and they're on the same team, and it's just incredible the amount of diversity on a track and field team, and the fact that there is truly an event for everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So when you started competing at 13, was there a moment when you knew like, hey, I really want to take this seriously and see how far I can push it? Or did that just kind of evolve naturally as you became better and better at running?
Yeah, I think it was really, kind of a slow progress between, okay, I don't love this sport, but I'm good at it, to, okay, I don't hate this sport and I want to see how good I can get. I would say it really didn't click in my mind until I turned pro. Like running was always this thing that I did as kind of ancillary, right? Like I in high school, I played other sports and ran. And then in college I ran, but I was really there to pursue academics. And then going into my senior year of college, I realized I had kind of like a very short window to see just how good I could be. I either needed to ditch running and go all in on pre-med, going into medicine, which was what I was studying, or I needed to ditch medicine and go all in on running. And at the age of 21, 22, I thought, I'm only 2 years out from an Olympic Games. Like if I'm ever going to take this risk, I should take it now. And so I did. I went from being a 3.9 student to a 2.6 student, but I also went from being ranked not even in the top 100 to being ranked number 2 in the US in a matter of 9 months. And it was just reallocating focus, reallocating resources, time, energy. But I'm glad I took that risk. And obviously it, dramatically it changed the rest of my life. But when I turned pro, I suddenly fell in love with running, because it wasn't this thing that I like had to do every day and had to like move classes around because of it. All I had to do was run. And I was like, am I seriously getting paid to do this now? Like I woke up, and between the hours of, 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., all I had to worry about was getting my workout in.
Yeah, I'm sure that level of focus is, rewarding in some aspects and very challenging in others. When things maybe don't go your way in training, or when you're having an off day or you're tired. Can you talk us through some of that? Like, how did you deal with times when you felt maybe a lack of motivation, or when you weren't progressing in a manner that you wanted to, or there were other like kind of unforeseen obstacles coming up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of I don't know where I saw this. Was it Goggins or Cam Hanes or somebody was like, you can't get to where you want to go on motivation, because motivation's fleeting. Like, and I'm a motivated guy. Like I knew where I wanted to go, but you are going to run out of motivation. And when you run out of motivation, you need to rely on dedication, structure, diligence, determination. I I remember, especially with distance running, just days where I was so tired and didn't want to train, but you know, you get your butt out of bed and you get your workout done. Um, it wasn't always easy, but I just knew that if I pushed through those barriers, pushed through those walls, I'd at least find out what was on the other side. And you know, speaking of, I was a pretty durable athlete, so I could kind of like push harder than some athletes that are perhaps more fragile. You know, like I wasn't bogged down by injuries. I was only bogged down by my level of focus. And as a guy who's kind of like spastic ADHD, like that was the biggest challenge for me. But you know, I knew that consistency would get me where I wanted to go, or at least consistency would give me a shot of getting where I wanted to go.
Yeah. And so if you wake up on any given day when you were, training at this high level, and you didn't sleep well the night before, or, your body wasn't quite recovered and you weren't able to kind of like execute at necessarily the level you wanted to for that day's worth of training, how would you shift things? Would you do things at a lower intensity? How would you handle that?
You know, that's one of the reasons I had this world-class coaching, and I was really vocal with them about how I was feeling. And some coaches listen to that and make adjustments, and some are stubborn and just tell you to do the work. I think my coaches appreciated that with me, I was probably going to work too hard than not work hard enough. You know, there are athletes that definitely will cut corners. And I think my coaches really quickly noticed that I was likely to burn out due to overwork than underwork. And so when I played that card, when I showed up to practice, I said, guys, I am done. I am burnt out. I need a break. They really listened to me, and they would give me a day off or change the practice or whatever needed to be done. But these guys, they're so smart. Frank Gagliano in particular, he had coached more middle distance Olympians than anyone else on planet Earth. And, when I said, coach, I need a day off, he'd be like, all right, get your butt home, get into bed, rest up. If another athlete that maybe wasn't quite as determined or diligent came and said, coach, I need a day off, he'd be like, he was just this gruff old guy from New Jersey. He'd be like, shut up and put your spikes on and hit the track. So he knew what made an athlete tick. He knew how to communicate with them, knew what they needed to hear. But for me, it was never a lack of motivation or determination. Like I was going to do the work. I would run myself into the ground. Because the way I saw it, I only had this really, really brief window to actually capitalize on the skills that I had. And the typical pro track and field career is only 2 to 3 years. So, you hit it hard, you hope that it materializes, and then you either age out or, injury out or financial reasons, you're out of the sport. 2 years, I went all in on it as a pro, made the 2008 Olympic team, signed another 4-year deal with Nike, made the 2012 Olympic team, and then signed a 4-year deal with Brooks Running. Ran for them for 4 years. I would have been at the Olympic trials in 2016, but I got injured right beforehand. So that was kind of the writing on the wall for me. I was like, I'm the grandfather of Team USA right now. I need to find something else to do.
Yeah, it's crazy that the career windows are so short. And I'm sure that factored in kind of like your decision to go after it when you were in college, right? Because it's kind of like, I can do this now or never, right? And you never would have known what you were capable of. And I mean, you can always go back to college or change your life plan after that. But if you wanted to take advantage of that window to really push your physical boundaries, it was kind of a limited amount of time to do that with.
Yeah, time, we always think of it as like this unfriendly thing that's just constantly pushing us and making us uncomfortable. And I think you can reframe your thoughts on time a little bit. Like if you realize just how limited your time is, and I'm talking about a lifespan, not like, oh, I don't have time to like work out. I'm talking about like in a lifespan. This is a river that's just going to push you faster and faster and faster. And you need to take advantage when you can. So knowing that I was never going to be younger and more fit than I was coming out of college, like that was an opportunity to go and tackle that goal. Now at 38, I'm recognizing that my body is, not able to do things that it once did. And if there's physical goals that I still want to accomplish, I need to get my butt into the gym and tackle them now. And so I'm sure a lot of people, men and women go through this. I'm not calling it a midlife crisis. I'm calling it a midlife recognition of what I'm going to be able to accomplish with the time that I have left. And from a physical standpoint, that is a much shorter window than, maybe from a business standpoint or a relationship standpoint. So I'm kind of like stacking up these physical goals and trying to knock them out one by one while I still have, healthy joints, healthy muscles, and an appetite to train that hard.
Yeah, with your ability and motivation, I'm sure you got plenty of time left ahead of you. But that's a great piece of advice to kind of let time be a motivator instead of like this foreboding thing. And you mentioned that you do have some physical goals left. Do you want to talk about what some of those are?
Yeah, I mean, I can't run the way I used to. And, everyone's always like, well, why don't you do masters running, or why don't you train for a marathon? I'm like, I can't. My knees hurt too bad. My hips hurt too bad. Like, I can't run the way I used to. And also, it's not very fun to do the same thing you've been doing over and over and over again. So when I retired, I didn't really know what I was going to get into. I was like, well, do I go pick up soccer, or do I, go just goof around in the gym? And I did that initially. I kind of went into the gym and just stared at the weights. I didn't really know what to do. And then, kind of putting on the pounds and getting frustrated. My wife saw me and she's like, why don't you just go down to the local CrossFit gym? I'm like, it's a cult. I don't want to do CrossFit. That's stupid. And she's like, just give it a try. So I dropped into a CrossFit class and I just fell in love with it. And I don't think CrossFit's for everybody. And I think there's some things that they do really wrong, but there's enough things that CrossFit does really, really right that for an aging athlete like myself, it is absolutely perfect. I love the competition side of things. I love how it's structured, how it's gamified. The diversity of movements allows muscles and joints to rest between sessions. And I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend that young people go all in on CrossFit unless, they absolutely love it. But for aging athletes, it is so good to push yourself that way. It's so good to push yourself past your comfort level. And oftentimes, older athletes aren't willing to do that. They'll go out for an easy run and they'll go and kind of like, phone it in at the gym. But if you want to stay in really good shape as you get older, you really need to push yourself. And CrossFit is a way to surround yourself with people and coaches and friends that are going to push you.
Yeah. And it does have similar elements, kind of the running, where there's a lot of measurable components, right? In terms of time, reps, weight, things like that.
Exactly. You can see progress, just like I saw progress in running, I see progress in the gym. So I think I would really like to be top 10% in my age group for CrossFit. I think I was in like the 70th percentile. So cracking that top 90 would be great. That's a goal. And then just a more concrete goal I set for myself 2 years ago that still combines running and lifting is to deadlift 500 pounds straight into a sub 5-minute mile. And I spent 2 years building my deadlift. It started out at 330 pounds 2 years ago, and I just lifted 495 pounds the other day. So
nice.
I'm 1% away from 500-pound deadlift. And, I think I could train myself down to a sub 5-minute mile still, but what a neat challenge it's been to like balance those two energy systems.
Yeah, that's that'd be quite the feat. And so you said you started off at a 330 deadlift. That's not bad for it. Did you just pull that cold, never having lifted much?
That was literally just as a ex-runner weighing 160 some pounds. I just walked up and just built up, hit 330. And then it really, beyond that, it became like studying the movement. Like, how do I get the most leverage? I learned about reverse grip. I learned about, using bands for training. Like, it's been quite a process to learn how to do a relatively simple movement at that level. It becomes much more complicated. Like if you just go into the gym and you deadlift 135 pounds, it's a very simple lift. But when you try to crank out those last few percentage points, those last few pounds, it becomes a much more technical lift, and you have to do it just right. I injured myself a lot in the early days. Now I'm able to, go out. I lifted really heavy this morning and I feel great. I feel really, really good after big, heavy deadlifts rather than broken like I used to.
Yeah, that's awesome. And probably shows just some of the physical developments that have happened as well to allow you to handle those heavy loads. And yeah, I know I had quite a stint of powerlifting in my mid-20s and know all about kind of like working through the different sticking points of the deadlift using bands to kind of like break through the lower planes of motion.
Bands was huge. Yeah. So, I mean, the big problem for me when I first started doing it was like the volume, like 5x5 at 80% of your personal best. You're just going to run out of grip before you give out. So once I started using figure eights, it's like, oh my gosh, now I can train my legs and my back without having to worry about my grip giving out. But then if you don't train your grip, then, you overpower your legs and your back and you can't even grab onto the bar. I think that for me, bands are a good training tool, but when it comes time to like compete or it comes time to do this challenge, it would be cheating to not do it naturally. do it. What's it in raw? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
In powerlifting, not do it raw. So, it's just been fun to learn about the sport of powerlifting. I entered my first powerlifting competition back in April and was able to put up close to 1,100 pounds. So,
At what body weight?
What was I was about 195 then.
That's awesome, man.
No, I mean, it's not gonna like set the world on fire. But again, I kind of compare everything with like 5 years ago, I weighed 155 pounds and was running middle distance. So like I'm transforming a skinny distance runner's body into a powerlifting CrossFitter body. And again, I know how long these things take. I think probably looking at about 45 when I hit my CrossFit peak. If I was thinking about this trajectory of how long it takes to transform your body and learn all the motions and become comfortable with everything, I'm probably just barely getting started. I need another decade under my belt before I feel like I'm really hitting my peak and my true stride there.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think when people get into a new sport, they get so excited about it and they want to go as hard as they can, as fast as they can. But coming from other athletic pursuits at a really high level, you're able to kind of take a step back and realize that it's going to take time, especially if you want to do it in a way that's healthy and not going to provoke a bunch of injuries, and also do it in a way that's sustainable for your age and stuff like that. I mean, I think that's a really wise approach to do it. I guess, do you perceive a significant difference in the trajectory it takes you now in your 30s as opposed to how it might have taken you back in your 20s?
That's a good question. I think the biggest difference is that in my 20s, I just never thought about injury. It was like, it's the only thing holding me back is how hard I can grind. Like I'll get tired and burnt out before anything gives out. And now it's the exact opposite. Something's going to give out way before my will or my, motivation, determination gives out. So, at 38, it's really more thinking about, okay, is that going to injure me? You're like, I need to continue to push myself and, to grow and to just to improve and get better. But you're constantly thinking about these little aches and pains. And fortunately, having been a pro athlete, I'm pretty good at diagnosing the aches and pains that I can push through and the ones that I can't. But in the back of my mind, on every lift, on every run, on, everything I do is like, is this going to injure me? Because an injury at any age keeps you out for a substantial amount of time, but an injury at my age, it's going to cost me way too much time.
Yeah, for sure. And some of that might be more wisdom than actual like biological age playing into that. Because you mentioned before, injuries as an Olympic athlete, they can be career enders even in your mid 20s, right? Early 20s.
Absolutely.
And so they're just as important to pay attention to back then. It's just probably a little bit more boldness and hubris and feeling invincible when you're that young.
100%. Yeah. And again, I was durable. Like a lot of athletes felt that in their 20s. They're like, I was always worried about an injury. It's just one wrong step or one bad run away from an injury. And I was not the most gifted athlete by any means. Certainly not the fastest, certainly not the most graceful on the track, but I was built like a freaking tank. And you could just throw doubles at me 7 days a week for 50 weeks straight, and I wasn't going to get injured. And that was my true genetic gift, was just being durable as all hell. And then, nowadays I don't have that. And I'm remembering all my, more fragile runner friends when they used to talk about how they always worried about injuries. And I'm like, oh, that's what this is like. But, again, being able to vary my training, go in the pool one day, run one day, bike one day, in the gym, a few days, like, I can really balance it out. And, for anyone out there who's dealing with injuries, there's a million ways to work out. There's no injury that should keep you sidelined. Well, maybe there's a couple, but most injuries you can train through in one way or another. If it's a stress fracture, go aqua jog. If you hate aqua jogging, swim laps. If you don't have access to a pool, ride a bike. If you don't have a bike, do yoga. If you hate yoga, do Pilates. I mean, there's really no excuse. Just find something that your body can do consistently, vary it up if you need to, find something that you enjoy. And I think, one of the things that has been so important to us as content creators is that we project that message that fitness should be fun, and we call all of our content, hey, this is fun with fitness. I'm not going to yell at you and tell you can never take a day off. I'm not going to tell you that you have to just keep hammering and, go hard or whatever the common mantras are. I'm here to tell you that fitness should be something that you look forward to. It should be something that you find fun. And whatever form that takes, if you like to go play ultimate Frisbee, I think that's awesome. If you like to power lift, I think that's great too. If you just like to go do hot yoga, what a wonderful way to like push yourself in the gym as well. So there's a million ways to work out, and there should be a way that everyone can find a fun, way to stay fit.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned that it's centering this conversation around injury and how that can like shift your approach to the gym while you might be recovering from one thing or another. I've had this conversation with other athletes I've talked to that have been operating at a high level for years. And this is a common thing that comes up with them is like, well, if I'm injured, there's still always something else I can work on, like take the deadlift, for example, like, yeah, a lot of it's a raw power lift, but there's a lot of technique to it. And, if you were injured in a way where you couldn't necessarily lift heavy loads, you could focus on the other elements of it, like the form, the explosiveness, creating better leverage, getting under the bar more, especially with other, like, the Olympic lifts in CrossFit. Like, so I had a brief stint with CrossFit too, and I was fairly strong, and I could kind of like brute force my way into some like heavy cleans and heavy snatches. But the people that were really good were not stronger than me. They were just way, way better. You know what I mean?
I mean, when you watch a 140-pound girl, do a perfect squat snatch, and she's, snatching twice what I'm able to do at 195 pounds, you're like, this is a technical lift. The squat snatch for sure, clean and jerks, not quite as much, but definitely still technical. Once I wrap up this 500-pound deadlift, 5-minute mile project, I think moving into the Olympic lifts is probably they're my two weakest lifts and the two that I most desperately want to be good at. So I'll move into an Olympic cycle for a while.
Yeah, my weakest lifts for sure are also the Olympic lifts. And I feel like it's really that ability to snap under the bar with speed. That was the most challenging thing for me, and probably would take the longest time to develop, just that ability to, if you watch in slow motion of like a really high level Olympic lifter, like they probably only pull the bar half as high as I would off the ground, and are just able like lightning to be able to just like snap under it and execute the lift like that.
Yeah, I can't do it. A lot of it's mobility for me. I'll have to like rehab my body and get some mobility to be able to do it. But watching those lifts, just when somebody does it just perfect and that bar just hovers there and they go so fast underneath it, it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, it really is. You've mentioned several times that you were a really durable athlete. Do you think that was mostly just down to genetics or determination, or were there anything special you were doing for nutrition, recovery, or anything else to kind of like fuel that durability?
Yeah, I wish I could say I was just super good at the little things and I was diligent with massage and stretching and ice bathing. And I did those things, but I think it was mostly genetic. I think there were guys that were way better at recovery and prehab than I was. And I think I was just built like a tank. My body recovered quickly. It liked to run. And, the sad part is that when the injury started creeping in, they crept in fast, like towards the end of my career, 32, 33, it was like one thing would start to hurt and then everything would start to hurt. And so it was like, I'm used to dealing with my left ankle hurting, but now my right knee hurts and my right hip hurts. And, it was like the whole chain was falling apart. And that's when I really knew that I needed to retire, because, dealing with one little issue here or there is very manageable. Dealing with 4 or 5 issues is not sustainable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, now that you are pursuing other athletic endeavors and taking this approach where you know that you don't want to be injured and you want to be in it for the long haul. I mean, you mentioned even with your CrossFit goals, like you think your peak will be 7 years from now. Do you have a different approach or focus to those recovery elements like massage, stretching, nutrition, sleep?
I've always been a sleep champion. So like my number one rule of training as a pro athlete was never, ever wake up to an alarm clock. And I still live by that motto today. I'm in bed at 8 p.m. every day just to make sure that I don't have to wake up to an alarm clock, because I think sleep's probably the number one thing you can do when it comes to recovery. I mean, eating healthy helps. Ice bathing's great. Massage is great. But if you're not sleeping, you're cheating yourself out of recovery. And it's like the easiest recovery ever, right? You're just laying there going to sleep. It's not hard. So I wouldn't say that I've gotten a lot better at recovery, but I do the things that I know I need, if that makes sense. I don't have a massage therapist anymore. but I also don't really need that. I do ice bath still. I really believe in ice bath for anti-inflammation. And then just eat healthy and sleep as much as I can.
Yeah, you kind of glossed over it, but sleep is easy, but I'm sure most people would have challenges trying to get in bed consistently at 8 o'clock.
It's just priorities, right? I hate bars. I hate clubs. I hate crowds. So like, that's not attractive to me. I love being up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and like sitting in my hot tub and stretching a little bit and going for a walk and like the quiet hours of the morning. So, to each their own. It's actually really interesting. I saw this study about like how human biological clocks are so different. And like some people physically can't bring themselves to work out in the morning. Like they just can't get their body awake and they have to work out in the afternoons. If you asked me, to work out in the afternoon, I probably would skip it 6 days out of 7. I hate working out in the afternoons, but I love working out in the morning. So there's no right, wrong. Like when I said there's no right or wrong way to work out, find what works for you from a activity standpoint. It's the same thing when it goes to timing. Like if you hate working out in the morning, then don't work out in the morning, just work out in the afternoon. And similarly, if you hate working out in the afternoon, work out in the morning, but don't fight your natural clock. Don't fight your natural biorhythms. Just figure out who you are, how you work out best, and then just live that life. I know that if I don't get up and work out in the morning, it's not going to happen. So I make decisions the night before to make sure that I get up in time to get my workout in.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. If you were to give our listeners like maybe the single biggest piece of advice you could in terms of like pursuing whatever athletic hobby that they're into, whether that's powerlifting or running or CrossFit, do you have a piece of advice you think kind of like rings true above all?
As they're just getting into it, or as they're like trying to really pursue it?
As they're trying to really pursue it.
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. So whenever you decide you want to be good at something, it's very easy to get excited about something. It's very easy to say, I'm going to be great at this. It's really hard to then move all the other things in your life around to make that a priority. So for example, I remember in college, like running was probably number 3, maybe 4 on my list of priorities. It was like family, school, social life, running. And I ran well, but not nearly as well as when I moved that number 4 priority into the number 1 spot. I made a conscious decision. I said, if I'm going to find out how good I'm going to be at this sport, if I'm going to become an Olympian, I have to move it to number 1, which means time with family is going to suffer. My social life is going to suffer. My academics are going to suffer. I knew that was going to happen when I made that decision, but that's the conscious decision that I made to do what we're talking about, which is, go all in on something or pursue something to a higher level. If you're not willing to make the sacrifices, if you're not willing to reallocate your time and energy, then all you're doing is just getting excited about something and wishing that you could be great at it. You are going to have to make sacrifices and have to make lifestyle changes to really find out how good you can be at anything you want to be great at, whether it's business, family, relationships, sport. If you want to really be great at one thing, you really have to make sacrifices for it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think the thing that people could think about within that is, if you're not a professional athlete, maybe your athletic endeavors don't need to be number 1 and sacrifice everything else below that. But where in kind of like that hierarchy of things that are important to you, do you want it to fall? Whether your family and career need to come first and then your athletics can come third, or whatever that looks like for you. I think just having that level of self-awareness to be able to determine where you need to prioritize it is great advice, because I think a lot of times what happens is that people may not think about that at all. And then, they have this hobby they want to pursue or these athletics they want to pursue. And because that thought process has never happened, they don't even know where they should be prioritizing it, and may never even like look at elements like sleep or getting up early to kind of get their workouts in and stuff like that. So no, I think that's really awesome advice.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy, but it's also kind of like a cheat code. If you want to really rise above, like if you make those sacrifices, you're doing things that 99% of other people aren't willing to do. Running was a really quick teacher of that for me, is that if I'm willing to go to bed at 8 p.m., I'm automatically like separating myself from 99% of other people my age who are not willing to do that. And so I just saw all of these little sacrifices as not so much being sacrifices as opportunities to get where I wanted to go. But, I'm not saying you need to quit your job and like leave your family to go pursue what you need to do. Just if you want to be a great athlete, maybe you move sleep to a slightly higher priority, or maybe you move diet, nutrition to a slightly higher priority. Not saying you have to quit your job, but like go to bed early so you can get your workout in before work. That's a small change that can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And in terms of that, you could be sacrificing relatively minor things, right? Like sacrificing, TV shows at night or something in exchange for that athletic achievement that's going to bring you a lot more satisfaction, and still be able to prioritize the other things like work and family. And I do wonder how much of your durability was due to the fact that as a college kid, you were able to get yourself in bed at 8:00 at night when probably a lot of other people were.
Maybe not 7 nights a week, but yeah, Sunday through Friday, Sunday through Thursday, I was asleep, and everyone would be like, "Come on, we're going out." I'm like, "I'll see you Saturday." Like, yeah. I've got priorities, and even as a pro, Saturday nights I'd shut down the bars. I was out till 2 a.m. So I think you still need to have balance in your life. You still need to be able to press that reset button once in a while. But what are you doing 90% of the time? What are you doing consistently that's allowing you to be reaching the goals that you've set for yourself?
And so now you juggle a lot, right? You have family, you have a business, you have your social media presence, you have these other athletic endeavors. How do you prioritize your athletic pursuits now? And how do you make sure that you're able to squeeze the time, and how do you orchestrate that throughout your day?
Well, one thing that's nice is that my primary job is as a fitness influencer, right? So like I can justify spending 3 hours at the gym as like, oh, I'm working right now. And it is to a certain extent, but like just me working out isn't really working, but making content while I'm working out, that certainly is working. So I think that's helpful. I've got a great team around me. My wife, she's amazing. She's very understanding. I've got 3 guys I'm surrounded by here that help me make great content. So I've always recognized that it takes a team. I was really vocal when I was running in the Olympics. I said, "Hey, you guys see me out on the track for 1 minute and 40 some seconds, but what you don't see is the 10 people, the 20 people that helped me get here." Any Olympian that you meet will have a team of 5 to 10 or more people that are with them every single day or every single week, helping them be great. And so I kind of carried that mentality with me into my YouTubing and social media career. Is like, I'm good at some things and I'm bad at a lot of others. And I need to find people who are really good at the stuff that I'm bad at. I am a YouTuber that will hit 1 million subscribers here in the next few months. I don't know how to edit video, so really quickly I needed to fix that problem. I'm a terrible producer, it turns out. Like I'm not great at production. So I've got these guys helping me with production now, and it's been huge. Just, identify your weaknesses and then find people that are good at those things and build a team.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if you don't have the resources to build like a professional team, I'm sure you could lean on friends, family, and other people that are maybe into the same stuff as you to kind of like create that team on like a more informal basis and still kind of lean on other people to be good at what you might not be.
Absolutely.
Well, Nick, it's been great chatting with you today. Before we go, why don't you give us a little bit rundown on this headband you're wearing? What is Run Gum?
Run Gum. Yeah. So it's a company I started actually when I was ranked number 2 in the world, 2014. I'd been drinking these energy drinks to try to get myself amped up for practices and races. And having a heavy acidic liquid sloshing around in your stomach while you're trying to run or lift is like the last thing you want. So I figured out that we could put caffeine, taurine, B vitamins, the ingredients that are commonly found in energy drinks, into a piece of chewing gum. And so now you can chew the gum, absorb those stimulants sublingually, and bypass your stomach. And so there's no indigestion, nothing heavy to slow you down, just the stimulants you want to go kick butt. And kind of took off. We started it as like a running product for runners, but then people from all walks of life appreciated this, really handy product. So it's sold in Target, Walmart, CVS, Amazon, every running specialty store you can think of. I was the CEO for 7 years, and I recently hired a CEO to manage the company so that I can focus on content creation, which I think is my number one passion.
Awesome. And if our listeners want to find and follow you or Run Gum, where should they look?
Anywhere on social, I'm at Nick Symmonds, and Run Gum's at Run Gum.
Awesome. We'll put the links in the show notes as well so that people can find you. Nick, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been awesome getting a look at your life, your history as an athlete, and kind of like the way you think about everything. It's always really rewarding and interesting to kind of be able to pick the brains of athletes that perform at a high level. And especially someone like you that's been able to kind of like pivot out of athletics into a bunch of other stuff successfully, and kind of like take those lessons you learned from being a high level athlete and apply those to other areas. Congrats, man, on all the success. And thanks for being here today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for the great questions.